Call the meeting to order. I'd like to welcome everyone to the Burke County Board of Commissioners for Tuesday, May 16th, 2023, here in the chambers at 6 p.m. Madam Clerk, we have Commissioner Smith, Commissioner Burns, Commissioner Vice Chair Britton, Commissioner Carswell, all in attendance. We also have Ms. Pierce, our CFO, our County Attorney, Mr. Simpson, and our County Manager, Mr. Epley, all in attendance, Madam Clerk. I'd please ask everyone, there's a good crowd tonight. I was wondering about the rain, but it abated just in time, so I'm glad to see a lot of faces here tonight. So I'd ask you to please silence your mobile devices. And I'd remind speakers to please activate the microphone when you come to the lectern so you can be heard by us and those folks in the room, as well as those folks following on YouTube. Gentlemen, I would ask the audience to please join us in the invocation. I'll ask, and I don't see the Reverend here, so I'm going to ask Commissioner Burns to lead us in our invocation. I would ask the audience to please remain standing, as I will ask also our County Attorney, J.R. Simpson, to lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance as well.
You would pray with me. Oh God, we're just grateful to be here tonight. God, I thank you for all those who are in attendance, and I thank you for all of those who are watching at home. We just pray for your guidance and your direction as we be about the business of this county. And Lord, just give us the heart of leadership, and Lord, just see us and guide us and direct us through every decision that we have to make. And we love you in Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen. Please join me in the pledge of the flag. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Please be seated. Thank you, gentlemen. Gentlemen, our first item of business is item number 4, approval of the agenda. You've had a chance to review the agenda. Do we have a motion to approve the agenda as presented?
So moved, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Vice Chair Britton. All those in favor signify with the uplifted hand. That is 5-0, Madam Clerk. That moves us on to approval of minutes. We have 3 sets of minutes to approve. September 6, 2022, Board of Commissioners pre-agenda meeting. September 6, 2022, Board of Commissioners special meeting. And September 20th, 2022, our regular meeting. Do we have a motion to approve the following meeting minutes as presented?
So moved, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Commissioner Burns. All those in favor signify with uplifted hand. Madam Clerk, that motion carries 5-0. That now brings us to presentations, and our first presentation is from Animal Services. Pet of the Month is Caitlin. Oh, there's Caitlin. I didn't see you earlier. I see Caitlin's got one of our furry friends back there. Who do we have with us?
We have Miss Bell with us tonight. She is going to be our May 2023 Pet of the Month. She's absolutely perfect. I am a big lover of hound dogs. I think they make the best family pets. They are always, they're always super friendly. They have this stigma that maybe they're not the brightest dog, but they really are incredibly smart. Their nose just gets in the way sometimes. So they are a little stubborn, but Belle is absolutely amazing. She is house trained. She loves 2-year-olds. She loves cats, goats, other dogs, you name it. She loves it. So she'll make somebody a wonderful pet. So if you are looking to adopt Belle, she is ready to go to her forever home. We never want to leave out our kitty cat, so we did want to highlight Mr. Nico. Nico actually found himself in our care. He's 14 years old. His owner passed away. So he is looking for a new family. He's very scared here in the shelter. Huge change of environment for him. So I would encourage you. We have several senior cats at Animal Services right now. They do make wonderful pets, so come down, check them out. I know they would love a place to go. Are you sniffing? We do have quite a few events coming up for Animal Services and our Animal Services Foundation in collaboration with the library. So Read to a Dog. So if you guys have children and you have not attended this event, hopefully the times are good. If they are not, reach out to us and let us know, because we would love to have more people attend. But we have a great time with this. The kids come in, and adults too. I think the adults may have more fun than the children, to be honest. But our hallways just get filled with families, and they're reading to our dogs. Our dogs are sitting there. They enjoy it. Our kitty cats get in on the fun too. So that's a great time. Hopefully everybody will be able to attend, and hopefully we'll be able to continue doing this little event. Our next one that we have will be your Strut Your Mutt Fun Walk, and this is actually a fundraiser for our Animal Services Foundation to support ongoing efforts through animal services. This will be at Valdez Lakeside Park. It's a morning. Get out there. You guys can walk your dog. We're going to have dogs out there that will be available to walk, and we are asking that you get sponsors. So you will sponsor your walking efforts while you're out there, and hopefully we can raise some money for animal services and the ongoing efforts we do have. And continuing on, that would be June 3rd, and then June 4th, this is a fundraiser for a new animal services center, and this was put together by Paws and Claws with effort from our Animal Services Foundation, and this is going to be at the Silver Fork Winery. I do believe we are still looking for some sponsors. Does Kay want to mention anything for that? Is that okay?
Yes, we'd love to have sponsors, and they start at $250 and go upwards. So just reach out if you're interested in sponsoring this wonderful event.
This will be a lot of fun. There are tickets available, so if you guys want to come and hang out, tickets pre-day of are $20, but if you buy them at the door, it is $25 to get in. But this will be a lot of fun. It's a Sunday afternoon. Come hang out with us. We're going to have dogs down there available for adoption as well. And last but not least, what we have coming up, we do have a rabies clinic. So if you guys did not hear, we had a positive rabies case down near Lake James. So we will be having a rabies clinic on June the 10th. It's going to be at Bell Farms. This is going to be $10 a vaccine, and we're going to be out there from 8 a.m. to 1 p.m. We are asking that you only bring your dogs, but you will be able to purchase a voucher for kitty cats, and we will do those at Animal Services in the confinement of a safe room, because we do not want any escapees. So we will be doing that, and if you need help with spay-neuter or anything while you're at the event, we will have some vouchers for spay-neuter through Reason on site as well. So that's just a few events that we have coming up. We are always very, very busy in the summertime. It is cat and kitten season. I would encourage you guys, if you haven't already come to visit us, we have lots of wonderful animals available for adoption. We're always looking for fosters to help us out during this time. Our kitty cats, we get full very quickly, so if we have cat fosters available, that helps us save more lives. So reach out to us, and that's all I have for this evening.
Caitlin, thank you. Gentlemen, questions, comments?
Lots going on.
Lots to do.
Very, very busy. Well, I'd like to recognize Bill as Dog of the Month and Nico as Cat of the Month, so I would encourage people to reach out. Looks like Bill's ready to go home with you.
Do you like they did me, and I'm going to ask you next month if you want my
Caitlin,
dog.
thank you.
Thank you.
I'd encourage everybody to foster or adopt an animal, and I would encourage all of you to spay or neuter your animals as well. So, thanks, Caitlin. That'll bring us to presentation number 2, presentation on the Burke County Search and Rescue Team. This will be presented by our friend Wes Taylor, Battalion Chief of Burke County Rescue, Burke County Search and Rescue Team.
Hello, gentlemen. It's good to see y'all again. Thank y'all for having us. It's a pleasure as always. We talked a little bit the other week, kind of about what we do and our job here in the county. Since we've talked to you, actually that evening we were dispatched to a water rescue call. Had to leave to go to that. Luckily, everything turned out fine. And since then, we've had 8 additional search and rescues in the 2 weeks since we've talked to y'all. So it's starting to heat up now. The summer is usually our busiest time of year. So we're starting to pick up our call volume and get out. You know, we had probably 4 this past weekend. 2 of them we weren't dispatched to, but in Oak Hill. So it's getting to be that time of year for us to be getting out and going to see people in the woods. So just wanted to go over a few things with y'all that we put together. We are a sub-asset to the rescue squad here in Burke County. We're 100% volunteer, and we're comprised of state-certified technical rescuers, EMTs, paramedics, RNs, and we have a physician on the roster as well. All of our purposes is responding to lost people, as well as missing persons, high-angle rescues, A few animals. We've worked with Animal Services quite a few times. We actually have a dog that we rescued from the woods and went to Animal Services and we adopted him. So that goes along hand in hand with it. We do the mountain rescue, swiftwater rescue, and we provide basic life support in conjunction with advanced life support from EMS here and their special ops team. So typically when we get a call out in the wilderness, if it's not injured, it'll typically be us and emergency management going, with occasionally special operations from EMS. And then when we get any sort of medical call in the wilderness area, we go along with special operations from EMS, and we focus solely on the rescue part of it while EMS takes care of the patient care. So, like I said, it's been getting busier and busier, especially since 2020 when we had over 120 search and rescues here in the county. Already we're at about 20 so far this year, and we haven't even gotten to the busy season. So we're starting to pick up a little bit. We've had, when we made this in mid-April, we were at 11, and we're at 21 now. So, and then we've had 2 water calls here in the past month as well. So it's that time of year. As you can see, the county advertises Nature's Playground quite a bit. This is just a list of a few of our calls from the past few years that have made it everywhere across the country, international. Like I was talking to our dog that we rescued from the sinkhole that ended up on USA Today, ended up on most major news outlets. So we bring in quite a bit of publicity for some of our, our actions in the gorge, along with EMS here. Like I said, we are all 100% volunteer, but we all pay for a majority of our equipment out of pocket. Our pack, clothing, personal protective equipment, majority of that comes out of our rescuers' own pockets. So we're looking for some help to help offset that cost, as well as looking for assets and equipment that we can issue department-wise when it comes to the jackets and the helmets and stuff. It's great to buy your own, but it's nice for us to have department-issued equipment that if someone moves or goes out of service for a while, we can reissue that equipment and be able to maintain it. Like I said, jackets are one of the main things, jackets and rain pants. They're durable enough for going through laurel thickets and through briar thickets and climbing up and down on rock, and being in some of the situations we get to, we go through jackets pretty quick. It's pretty easy to rip a hole in some of the stuff. So these Alpine jackets, new lightweight helmets, lightweight equipment is key for our operations. Our weight adds up really quick when you throw it in a backpack. There's no fire truck there. So weight-wise, we have to look around and find what's best for our people to be able to get in with what we need as safely as possible. So this is one of our primary response districts right here. It's an absolutely beautiful place to be, but it's a really dangerous place to be. Here we've got, a picture of some of our rescuers on a call down in the amphitheater. This was just a climber that was going to the base of his climb, just happened to brush up against a rock, suffer an injury, and it would have been at least an 8 to 10 hour carry out to get him out from where he was in a Stokes basket. We requested a helicopter for this one, had the assistance from North Carolina Hard Team, came in, picked him up on the helo. Some of the circumstances we find ourselves in, there's a Black Hawk helicopter right above us, down the bottom of that helicopter. It's anywhere from 60 to 80 miles an hour. Jackets, helmets, and all that are essential components of our job. So this is part of our Preventive SAR campaign that we started in 2020 after we saw our record number of calls. This is a pamphlet that we share with local media, social media, and we hand out now whenever we are up in the Table Rock parking lot waiting for people, whenever we pull someone out of the woods that wasn't quite prepared. We hand out this list of the 10 essentials that we ask everyone to carry with them when they go hiking, whether it be an hour-long hike to go see the waterfall or for 3 days when you go backpacking. This can mean the difference between life and death, and it can mean the difference between a rescue. Just having enough water when you're hiking and having the right equipment that when the weather changes, you're prepared for it. You don't have to call us to come get them. And that's helped some. We've certainly cut down on call volume since 2020, but it's still nowhere what it used to be. So we're working with Brian here, talked with him the other day on getting some stuff going for our members. So we really appreciate that. And look forward to working with y'all. So we've got a few of our members here. If y'all want to raise your hand, we've got one out in the lobby. My wife and my daughter are out there. She's also a member of the SAR team and the rescue squad as well. So we really appreciate y'all's support and your help for helping us do the job we love to do. So, yep, thank you very much.
Wes, thank you so much. Gentlemen, questions, comments? We all are quite appreciative of the things that you do that we take for granted. Somebody goes out and it's not a daylight job either. Most of the time it can be in the middle of the night. So
Yep.
y'all have some unbelievable conditions y'all face.
We were out just last night, looking for someone that got left behind in the gorge. So it's a all too common occurrence around here. But we really appreciate y'all's support.
And as you had mentioned, you spoke with Brian, and
Yep.
we're going to
Yep.
address some of those out-of-pocket
Yep.
expenses
Yep.
for you and your team.
Yep. All right. Thank you very much.
Any other questions, comments?
Thank you very much.
Gentlemen, do we have a motion to accept the report as presented?
Mr. Chairman, I make that motion to accept the report as presented.
Thank you, Commissioner Burns. All those in favor signify with uplifted hand. That is 5-0, Madam Clerk. Thank you. That moves us to item number 3, Foundation for Charters of Freedom, presentation of framed civil rights amendments. This will be presented by Dr. David Streeter. How are you, sir?
I'm well, and I hope everyone there is too. But thank you, Mr. Chairman and Commissioners and Administrators, for allowing me to come here again to present this to you tonight officially. I am David Streeter, the Education Director for Foundation Forward, and I have the honor of doing this at many places around the country. But just to give you a little bit of background, the Charters of Freedom, as I mentioned the other day, consists of the Declaration of Independence, the United States Constitution, and then also the Bill of Rights. Our founding fathers knew that when they wrote these documents that things change in a society for whatever reasons, and they had the insight to write the Constitution so that it could be altered and fix mistakes or bring it up to date. So as society has changed and advanced, so has Foundation Forward. And because of the democratic as opposed to the autocratic leadership within Foundation Forward as a group, but especially because of our benefactors and founders, Vance and Mary Jo Patterson, the Civil Rights Amendments were put together collectively for the first time, and this has not been done by our government or any other entity. So this is very special and unique to us. And what I would like to do is go ahead and unveil this, if I could get some help maybe, and talk about it for just a little bit. Thank you. This is the Burke County's Civil Rights Amendments. And if you'll notice, it's the 13th, 14th, 15th, 19th, and 24th Amendments, collectively known as the Civil Rights Amendments. This is what makes us all equal in our society and have all the rights and privileges that it takes to live in this wonderful country. And like I said, this is the first time that these have been put together. Now, I said that Foundation Forward has evolved. What we're now doing, what we have done in the past is built the settings, and notice I call them settings and not monuments, because the documents of the Declaration of Independence, the Constitution, the Bill of Rights, and the Civil Rights Amendments, they're alive and well. A monument pays an honor or a tribute to something that's or a person who's no longer to us. Because these documents are alive and well, we call it a setting. So what we're now doing when we build settings in counties and cities across the country, we have expanded it by one more pedestal to include this on the same bronze tablets that we use in the Declaration, the Constitution, and the Bill of Rights. And something else I would like, if later on when you get an opportunity to come by and take a look at this, from the 13th Amendment to the 24th Amendment took almost 100 years. So it shows that things may not happen fast, but good things do happen that can benefit everyone. So what we would like to do as far as Burke County is concerned, we would like and invite you to please pass this around throughout the county to all the departments. Display it for several days in each of those departments. Maybe have someone present this to the departments and explain what it is, where it came from, what it means. Being a resident of Burke County, I'd be willing to help do that. And then once that is done, to share this with the local school system. And I recently met with Dr. Wilson about what all the things that we're doing. He is the Chief Academic Officer for the Burke County School System. And we told him about this, and then we would like you to turn it over to them and let them borrow it. And do the same thing throughout the school system. Take it to each school. Have someone designated to, again, explain what it is, where it came from, and what it means. Then once that is all completed, to find a very nice, appropriate place for it to be mounted permanently. And that's your decision. The only thing that I can suggest is maybe put it close to the current setting so that people can see that this is a continuation and a part of the three-piece setting that's at the historic courthouse now, and this would be the fourth. So that's basically my presentation. Thank you. I'll take any questions if you have them.
Thank you, Dr. Streeter. Gentlemen, questions, comments?
I make a motion that we accept the donation of the framed replicas of the Civil Rights Amendments to the United States Constitution from Foundation Forward, Incorporated, and express appreciation for the gifts.
Thank you, Commissioner Smith. All those in favor signify with uplifted hand. That is 5-0, Madam Clerk. And Dr. Streeter, if you wouldn't mind, if you would stand up there with the five of us, I'd like to
Okay.
have Kate.
I would be honored to do so.
Actually, we'll carry it over here and get in the middle.
I just hope I don't break your camera. And one last note, it is witnessed by yours truly right here. So.
Yeah, 3 and 3. That's perfect. All right, you ready? Cheers. Got it.
Once again, thank you, Dr. Streeter. Great presentation. We're honored for the donation.
And if you need anything else from us, I'm right here in town. Randy does that.
Randy can run anybody down.
That's right.
Thank you again. Gentlemen, that'll move us to presentation number 4, recognition of winners from the Chamber's Spring Litter Sweep presented by our good friend Tanya Stevenson, Burke County Chamber of Commerce President. Tanya, how are you, ma'am?
I'm wonderful. Hope you guys are.
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you so much for having me back tonight. Good evening, Chairman, Mr. Chairman, Commissioners, Manager, Clerk, and others. We're so excited that we're celebrating our litter sweep. We had a very successful one this year. Unfortunately, we got a lot of litter, so we picked up a lot of litter, though, throughout the community. I want to recognize Jenna Cole. She is the powerhouse behind our litter sweep and does all the work behind it, and so passionate about it, and she just does a fabulous job. I'm so thankful to have her on the team. With everything at the Chamber, as anybody knows anything about the Chamber, we don't do anything without partners. So we are so very grateful for the county for partnering with us on the litter sweep. The convenience site hosts that work there, they just seem like they got excited about seeing the litter come in, and they were just really great to work with. And we appreciate Mark from the county, and Kay especially has just been so good to work with us, and we're very appreciative of that. We also partnered with Republic Waste, was our presenting investor for the program. They also gave us an opportunity to do recycling this year, so we were very glad to add that to the process. And that was something that was a real passion for Jenna's, and she made it happen with the help of Republic Waste. We also work very closely with NCDOT, very grateful for their partnership and support. If you come to our kickoff celebrations or our celebration events, Buffalo Wild Wings always brings out lots of goodies, and so we eat really good on behalf of them. So we're very grateful for them and grateful for First Presbyterian Church, who hosts both of those events. So the numbers are, we were just blown away this year. This was just our second annual litter sweep, and we were really excited about seeing the community get behind it this year, and we just know it's going to grow and grow. Everybody we talk to said we'll be back next year with more people, and so we're excited about it. Unfortunately, we'll still have litter, but but we're working on what we can. We had 241 people to register for the event. We had 118 show up and turn in paperwork. I'm thinking the difference between that is a lot of those still went out and picked up litter, but they didn't turn in the paperwork. So we can't account for those people. But I'm hoping that a lot of those people still did go out and participate. Throughout the week, and this was the week of April 24th through the 29th, the community picked up 239 bags of trash plus 24 bags of recycling. And that's just amazing to me, and really grateful for that. And that was with having a few of those days raining, so that the weather did not cooperate on a couple of days. And that doesn't include the 14 plus items that were large items that couldn't be put in bags. For instance, car batteries, tires, 3 sofas were picked up that we know about, plus other large items. So it was a lot of things getting off the sides of the road here in Burke County. And what we are excited to hear are the winners. I have checks for the winners tonight. They didn't get their actual checks at the celebration, so they're coming tonight for that. And I think, Scott, you have a gift for them as well. Is it okay if I call them up?
Please do.
Okay. So with third place, and the Chamber gives cash prizes. In third place with the $150 cash prize, who picked up 20 bags. We have lots of representatives from the Girl Scout Troop 2396. So ladies, if y'all would come join us, Mr. Chairman, I think Mr. Chairman's going to come give you a gift. I have a check for you. I'll come up front. Mr. Chairman's coming up front. I think that there's some mamas and daddies back here that help with the participating as well. Second place prize, we had a group called Loving Our Neighbors. They get a cash prize of $250, and they cleaned up a homeless camp, and are giving their prize winnings to Burke United Christian Ministry. So we're really sweet with that. And we have Ashley representing that group. If you'll come join us up front, join our commissioners. And unfortunately, our first place prize winner is not able to be with us tonight, but I want to really brag on him. He's a second-time winner. He's a one-man show, and he's been out picking, he goes out and picks up trash 52 weeks out of the year probably, or at least close to it. But for that week, he picked up 80 bags of trash, 3 car batteries, 8 tires, and 2 sofas. And that is Mr. Gary Jennings, and he's given his prize to St. Charles Borromeo Catholic Church. So these guys and mamas and daddies back here all get, just want to know, thank you on behalf of the Chamber of Commerce.
Anybody would like to come forward and take a picture? You know, parents have to take a short.
So thank you all for all that your hard work. Excuse me. So again, on behalf of the Chamber of Commerce, County Manager and Clerk, thank you, Commissioners, for supporting this event and allowing us to do this for the community. And I do want to say congratulations to all the winners as well as all the participants, because we all win with doing this project. So.
Absolutely. Let's give them another round of applause, please. Well, gentlemen, do we have a motion to accept the report as presented?
I'd like to make a comment before we do that. I wish that they'd take those couches over to Burke County School Superintendent Mike Swan so he can burn them after West Virginia beats Texas this year before they join the Southeastern Conference.
Okay. Any other comments, gentlemen?
Mr. Chairman, I'd just like to say litter on our roadways is one of the biggest challenges that we face in this county. And I see, I drive out 18 to George Hildebrand every day, and I see it. And I'll admit I don't always stop, but I do stop when I have time to pick it up. And I'm especially grateful to all these that are willing to get out there and spend their time. And I mean, if it can be something as simple as walking across the parking lot and picking up a receipt that someone dropped. So we just all need to do our part. And I just want to express my heartfelt gratitude to all those who did. And Tanya, thank you and your staff, and Kay and the county manager and everybody that helped put this together. We really appreciate it.
Well said, Commissioner Burns. Any other comments, gentlemen? Do we have a motion to accept the report as presented?
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to make the motion to accept the report as presented.
Thank you, Commissioner Burns. All those in favor signify with uplifted hand. Thanks again, Tanya, and your staff. You've done a wonderful job. Well, gentlemen, that'll bring us to item number 7, scheduled public hearings. There are none, so that will put us at item number 8, informal public comments. Madam Clerk, do we have anybody that wishes to speak?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We have 4 citizens that pre-registered to speak tonight. The first one would be Dr. Kenneth Carrico.
Well, good evening. My name is Ken Carrico. I'm a 16-year resident of Burke County, a former practicing psychologist, and an active member of the Republican Party. First, I could be focusing tonight on the importance of lower taxes, a hallmark of the Grand Old Party, but indeed I'm not. Second, I could be focusing on the importance of our commissioners assuring election integrity, that is to say, the prevention of voter fraud by requesting data experts to screen our election software, but again, I'm not. Instead, my focus this evening is the long-lived controversy surrounding the Civil War Memorial. However, I'm not focusing on the arguments for or against removing the memorial. However, personally, I fully support its continuing untouched presence on the courtyard square, viewing it as a solemn reminder of lost lives, just like grave markers are in a cemetery. And for that matter, just like the Grand Colosseum in Rome is of the suffering and death of Christians in antiquity, neither should be removed or destroyed. Again, instead, I wish to focus on a viable option to resolve this dilemma, which keeps coming up once and for all, by another route. And what would that route be? I'm proposing that a memorial to the evils of slavery be designed, developed, erected, and dedicated on the courtyard square. City and county leaders, local clerics, the NAACP, and other concerned citizens could prayerfully consider this option, and both with donations and local government support, advance this initiative without delay. In closing, as a community, let's stop being divisive. Let's move forward to enrich, not destroy, our history. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Carrico. Madam Clerk?
Mr. Sam Avery.
Gentlemen, Sam Avery, 115 Riverside Court, Morganton. I'm so glad I got to see Foundation Forward present the Civil Rights Amendment. I know that organization very well. They do outstanding work, and this is a great addition. Thank you for accepting that. I represent tonight the Burke Coalition for Racial Reconciliation. As you know, for 2.5 years, people have come here each month to address during public comment. Tonight, we're doing something a little different, starting something new. Our group meets just before your group meets each month. And now what we would like to do is come each month and give you a little report on our meeting. And that's why I'm here tonight. So I left our meeting at New Day Christian Church where about 30 members were present. And tonight the program was we watched the commencement address at the University of North Carolina, which happened over the weekend, and the speaker was Bryan Stevenson. Bryan Stevenson is about my age. As a youngster, he grew up in a rural setting in a place that his father could not attend high school because they would not provide a high school. They had to be forced to provide a high school. Bryan Stevenson overcame that. He graduated from Harvard Law School and Harvard School of Government. He could have taken a job with any law firm in the United States. He decided to move to Alabama and start a program to help innocent people who were on death row. He hatched that initiative to help those prisoners, and it evolved into an organization called the Equal Justice Initiative. Among other things that Equal Justice Initiative has done is they have created 2 remarkable educational sites in Montgomery, Alabama. One of them is called the National Memorial for Peace and Justice, and it commemorates the documented approximate 4,000 lynchings that have happened all over our country, north, south, east, and west, since the time period after the Civil War right up until the end of the 1950s. And yes, there is a monument there for Burke County, North Carolina, that has the 2 documented lynchings that occurred here. One of those lynched individuals was laid at the base of that statue right uptown. It's a documented history. He also started the Legacy Museum that addresses enslavement to mass incarceration. Mr. Stevenson told the Carolina graduates to step outside of their comfort zones, to share life with people who are different from them as they move into life. And I close with something I observed. This will take me just a second. I went to church Sunday, and after church Sunday, I greeted an elected official I've known a long time. He's not a member of our church, but occasionally he visits. And we chatted for a while, and suddenly he disappeared. And he walked across the street, and there were 3 homeless men sitting on the wall over there, and he went over there and engaged them in conversation. And I thought, that's how reconciliation begins, when people who are different talk to each other. We encourage you all to try to take the lead in racial reconciliation in Burke County. It wants to happen. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Avery. Madam Clerk?
Mr. John McCormick Holderegger.
Thank you, members of the commission, for the time. I'd like to yield some of my time to the gentleman there. It's very interesting. I'd like to hear more of what he has to say. I'm here representing Silver Creek Golf Club in Morganton, just off Jamestown Road. We're a public golf course. We're a public restaurant. This is basically in preparation for a potential vote by the county commissioners on the adoption of the North Carolina brunch bill. We're one of the few municipalities that do not have that particular law adopted. Our business is one of what I found to be 3 businesses in the entire county that are affected by the fact that the county has not adopted the North Carolina brunch bill. Basically, the brunch bill would allow the sale of alcohol before noon on Sundays. To us, it's just a matter of fairness and opportunity for us. We're lucky to be here. This is an amazing place, and we just want the same opportunity to be a successful business as other businesses in the area. Most of the other businesses are covered by specific city charters or other counties, and they have all adopted it. So I'm hoping that as it goes forward, that it will be brought before the board as an official motion and to be adopted. And that's basically it. Thank you very much for the opportunity. This is a great place. It's a great night to be here with Tanya and the rescue. With this, I feel very honored to be here. So thanks very much.
Thank you, sir. Madam Clerk?
Mr. Maynard Taylor.
Very pleasant good evening to you, commissioners, County Manager Brian Heflin, Kay, also to county department heads that are here, and county staff, fellow citizens and guests. I greet you on the subject of Civil War and the monuments. Some of this you have heard before, but I hear wind in the breeze and words in the breeze that there's still an effort to change something that the Constitution protects that you can't change. And I just wanted to remind you, some of this you've heard before. There were 6 wars before the Civil War. They were the Gulf War, the Vietnam War, the Korean War, World War II, World War I, Spanish-American War, and the American Civil War had more casualties, 620,000 casualties for that one war. And that's more casualties than all the other wars combined, including those after the Civil War, which was the Mexican-American War, the War of 1812, and American Revolution, which was 75 through 1783. The 6 wars combined before the Civil War was 618,304. American casualties of these, 20,000 of them, were African Americans. The American Civil War had 620,000, and there are historical reports from several different firms that they had 400,000 missing in that war. Many of them were wives, children, after the war had gone through the town, and there's awfully some real stories and how all that happened. If this is an actual number, the total number of American casualties in the American Civil War is over 1 million people. I logged on the internet, it's been a little more than a year ago, but I logged and asked, how many times does the Bible instruct us to remember or a form of remembrance? And the answer was 6,840 times. I won't be able to read all this. I have given Kay a copy. You commissioners or anybody in here or any citizen of Burke County may request it. But I'm running out of time, and I want to leave you with a very important question, a food for thought question. Think about it. What kind of person does it take to ask someone to cheat, to lie, to destroy what is protected by law, or break the law, especially when you swore with an oath, with your hand on the Bible, to keep and protect all federal laws, all state laws, all county laws, so help you God. We all took that oath. Could it possibly be that the same type of person that demanded Christ should be crucified while demanding really bad criminal be set free? Folks, it is time for us to protect the Constitution, the purpose of the Constitution, and why we need to protect them is simply from remembrance of what a horrible time it was. We don't need to go through it again.
Thank you, Mr. Taylor.
Thank you very much.
Madam Clerk?
That's all the cards I have.
All right, well, gentlemen, this will move us to item number 9, consent agenda. I'll ask our county manager to review the items on the consent agenda.
Yes, sir. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Several items for consideration, and each of these were presented at your pre-agenda meeting 2 weeks ago. Item 1 is adoption of an alternative fee schedule for animal services for other species other than companion animals, dogs, and cats. Item 2 is approval of the presentation of financial data for the period ending March 31st, 2023 from Burke County Public Schools. Item 3 for consideration is from our clerk, appointment to the Council of Aging. Item 4, also an appointment. This is to the JCPC Council. Item 5 is consideration for appointments to the Parks and Rec Commission. Item 6 is from the Finance Office. This is approval of our public school building capital lottery funds application and annual process. And those funds will be used for existing debt service. Item 7 from General Services is approval for our lead service line inventory grant. Item 8 for consideration is from the Sheriff's Department, and this is a resolution that would award a county-issued service weapon for a retired employee. Item 9, also from the Sheriff's Office, an approval to request the use of federal narcotic forfeiture funds for a training event. Item 10 would be from our JCPC function, approval of the county's annual plan as required, along with the annual funding allocation. Item 11 is the release report for April 2023 from our tax department. Item 12 corresponding would be the monthly collection report for April 2023 from the tax department. Item 13 would be a financial update from our Tourism and Development Authority for the period ending March 31, 2023. And finally, for consideration, item 14 which is a presentation of financial data for information ending March 31, 2023 for Western Piedmont Community College. Mr. Chairman, I think that concludes the lengthy consent, and I'm happy to answer any questions you may have.
Jim, any questions? Thank you, Mr. Epley. There being none, what's the pleasure of the board?
Move the consent agenda be approved as read.
Thank you, Vice Chair Britton. All those in favor signify with the uplifted hand. Madam Clerk, that is 5-0. Gentlemen, this brings us to item number 10. Items for decision, presentation of recommended budget for fiscal year 2023-2024 and the scheduling of a public hearing. This will be presented by Mr. Brian Epley, our county manager. Again, I hope your voice is warmed up.
Yeah, that's right. Chairman, members of the board, thank you so much for the opportunity. It's an exciting opportunity. As you're all well aware, after arriving in February, I immediately jumped into the budget process following the board's lead. I think I have a mobile device today. Yeah. Can you hear me okay? We'll go back there. I told Scott it would be very difficult for me to work through this slide PowerPoint being nailed to this podium. So I had to have a little more strategic initiative this evening. But the budget process is something that I think is unique. It gives us an opportunity to link priorities with resource allocation in an effort to try to get better, in an effort to try to evolve, try to do more. And I think that's the concept behind the budget that I'll be presenting tonight, is that we've tried to first identify priorities, and we've done that throughout the budget process with the development of a strategic plan, also a capital improvement plan highlighted, and those priorities, those deliverables, as you're all aware, were created based on logic and need. So trying to analyze in a data-driven way where are areas that county government can impact lives, can advance the community. What are the things that each of you see as things that are going to be beneficial to the citizens of Burke County. And then as we identify those logic-based and data-driven priorities, we're able to shape the budget around those. And so what I have for you tonight is I'm going to move this down a little bit, is a PowerPoint slideshow that walks you through the highlights. Each of you have been distributed the full budget, including all the details. In conjunction, there is a budget message that is a narrative of the summary from the manager's office. Following tonight's presentation, the board will be asked to consider setting a public hearing for June the 20th. And then during that span, between now and June 20th, the budget will be allocated across the county in 4 or 5 different spots for community input. Is that feedback coming through you guys? Is that hard to hear? I can circle back.
It's a little low.
Is that better?
That's better.
Is that better? I can transition back as my mobile device. I think you are. I'm going to circle back here. So clearly that didn't work. And I typically save that for halfway through when people are asleep. We'll get that out of the way first thing.
That made me think of an old Ronald Reagan quote. He was giving a speech and something happened and he just said, "Missed me."
Yeah. I've titled this presentation Dollars and Cents being those logic-based, data-driven priorities, and dollars being the resource allocation that we're trying to highlight. And again, this will be the full budget will be out for public inspection for the next 30 days until the board votes. So the way that we've laid this PowerPoint out is I think it's important to start first by evaluating where we've been, how have we been performing. Then we'll talk briefly about the development process, policy direction from our Board of Commissioners. We'll follow that by a brief economic outlook that really helps mold our revenue forecast. So many of our revenues are driven by economic energy, and obviously our revenue forecast is going to drive the spend side of our budget. We'll talk next about the general fund tax rate, our operational budgets, capital improvement plan, education support,
funding for our outside partners, and then close by briefly visiting both of our proprietary funds, solid waste, and water sewer budget. I thought it'd be a good place to start by, and this is something that we've talked about consistently through the budget process, and that is finding the intersection between preparedness and opportunity. And I've been very purposeful about saying how much I've admired how this board in recent years has prepared for this moment of execution. Preparation to have a bond rating that's AA+, top 15 in the state of North Carolina, fund balance that's been grown. We have changing in leadership, new board members. There are so many things that have really synchronized in a way to make now the time. And having that level of preparedness, if it doesn't intersect surgically with the opportunity, I think we can miss the boat. But that's where I think we are. That's where I think this budget is. I think it's a transformational document that really sets Burke County up to be successful long term. One of the areas that I think can measure our success and really multiply our impact is making sure that we know what it is that we're trying to accomplish and how we measure success. We talk a lot about if you can't measure it, it didn't happen. How do we make strategic investments and then also consistently and fluidly measure those outcomes so that we can be refined in real time? And I think that's a huge component of culture. And I would argue that as we pursue high performance through linking both operational strategy with organizational culture, the most effective way to cultivate the outcome we want is through investing in our people, physical environment, which is our tools, our buildings, our infrastructure, and lastly, technologies. And I think those three operational systems are really what drive performance. And you'll see each of those areas are areas of highlight in this upcoming budget, with people really being the top priority. One thing that I also think is important to point out as we are embarking on this continued journey of high performance is just like any other corporate entity, Burke County is a corporation that's required to conduct business. And as inflationary costs impact people's lives and impact other businesses in the corporate world, it also impacts our cost of doing business. And so before we ever start the budget, there are very real, very costly areas of our budget that have experienced this inflationary cost increase. And when you marry an inflationary cost of roughly $825,000, and that is additional cost for doing the exact same thing we did last year, and you marry that in a growth period of trying to do more, trying to enhance public safety, trying to pursue being an employer of choice, recognizing that our people are the tip of our spear, trying to make sure we give adequate facilities, things like new collection sites. When you're trying to do more and in a period of rising cost and this growth factor, there simply is cost associated with that. We believe that local government matters. We believe that that local government, when you compare, is where the grassroots impacts people's lives. We think that that doing it, moving from good to better to best, will make a real impact, and that's something that we really want to hyper focus on as we advance. Is that there is some associated costs of not only with inflation but with doing more as a component of our budget. As I mentioned, I think the first step to understanding where you want to go is to evaluate where you've been. That gives you your starting point. So I want to start there and highlight that Burke County government is a subdivision, a political subdivision of the state of North Carolina. We literally are created by the General Assembly via law. And in that relationship, there are certain things that we are required to offer. There are other things that we are authorized and choose to offer. And we talk in our leadership team a lot about, our goal shouldn't be to spend less. Our goal should be to spend a responsible, reasonable amount that provides the most service, the most premier service to the citizens of Burke County. But if our goal is to spend less, we should simply do less. But that isn't what we were created to do. Here I put together just a quick optic of the things that the General Assembly requires that we do. And the way that this chart is intended to communicate is, for example, 911 communications. We are required by state law to provide that service. And when you take our investment into 911 communications and divide it on a per capita basis across all the citizens of Burke County, it's roughly $23 per year to ensure that 24/7, 365, and with redundancy and precision and accuracy, that we get the appropriate emergency response dispatch. And you can move down the chart and kind of see what the service is and what that cost aligns with. Here's a list of things that are offered, that are authorized but not required, and again, kind of the corresponding cost. And when you add the two charts together in a cumulative way, that adds up to about $604 per capita tax levy for Burke County citizens. And when you look at a map of the state of North Carolina, and you can see we're here in this wider color, we literally rank, as you can see here, 83rd out of 100 in the lowest per capita tax levy across the state. So there's been a real desire and a real focus on efficiency and on providing high quality service at a low cost. But one thing, again, as we remember and we've talked about many times, purchasing an ambulance in Burke County is the same cost as purchasing an ambulance in Wake County. Paying a social worker here is similar cost to paying a social worker in Catawba County. And so we've got to balance performance and outcomes with the cost of doing business. Again, reflecting where we've been over time, I think it's important here. This optic's just showing how our general fund budget has incrementally grown over time, no substantial changes. In the blue bar here, this orange line is a demonstration of what's called unassigned fund balance, and as the board's well aware, this is something that's measured by the Local Government Commission. It's essentially, we hear our state folks talk about rainy day fund or equity, and that's what I would point out here when we talk about the intersection of preparedness and opportunity. You can see the very clear intentionality to growing that fund balance to be in a more secure and stable place. That's what's led to a AA+ bond rating and the strong financial position that Burke County has positioned itself in. When I compare where we are at roughly 33.3% to our peer group, we're obviously ahead, and I think that's a strong position that helps us have flexibility to invest in priorities. I'm often asked which one's better, and again, this is comparing to about 10 other counties in North Carolina of similar socioeconomic, similar budget size, similar population size. And the point in demonstrating that we're a little bit higher and then articulating which is better, I think it's dependent upon what it is that you're trying to accomplish. So the example that I would share is if an individual has excess savings in their personal bank account but a hole in their roof, they may not be putting their resources in the area of highest priority. And I think that's part of the conversation and the balance that we have during this upcoming budget is to evaluate how we potentially could leverage some of this preparation to generate the outcome that advances the purpose of Burke County government. When I look at our total general fund budget, again, compared to peer counties across the state, the story and the narrative is similar. Our peer counties will be here in these blue bars, Burke County's there in the orange, and the takeaway is generally Burke County has spent less on our operational departments. Here's just a quick dashboard. I won't go through each of them, but it's comparing in some of our higher cost functions, EMS, Sheriff's Department, Detention, and 911. You may see this transition here in 911 where Burke County spent less and some of our peer counties have spent more. That's people. Right? There's been a high level of turnover. It's an industry with high wage escalation. There's been market adjustments with some of those peer counties that really drive that operational cost. But I think we would all agree having adequate staffing and trained professionals in a high stress, critical path public safety function is something that is a basic responsibility of local government. And that's just something, again, we need to keep in mind. Here we've evaluated public health and social services. These functions are a little bit different. Public health often driven by the gap that public health has to fill when looking at the private market. Obviously, they have to provide services that may not be offered by the private market, again, kind of fill that gap. And social services budgets often driven by factors outside of our control. Medicaid eligibility is one of those things. But what we want to manage and monitor here is what is the local cost metric to balance those budgets. I would point out both of these functions are highly driven by people costs, so there's not a lot of operational, supplies and those type of things involved. in those two. But again, I think the general takeaway is there's been a lower cost requirement to operate those two departments over time. And the question becomes, well, what does that create? What is the cause and effect there? I'd also point out, if you recall, to kick off when we said, well, let's evaluate where we've been, we talked about investing into people, into infrastructure, into technology. This is showing our investment into human capital, our employees, going all the way back to 2014. Last year, we spent about $27 million on people. For the average employee who stayed in the same position with Burke County since 2014, they've received about a 15% pay increase over that time frame, which, as you can see, hasn't been able to keep up with inflationary costs. So that really puts a financial burden on some of those employees, and oftentimes forces those folks to make decisions about exploring other opportunities. And so, again, if we believe that our people are the tip of the spear and the purpose that we're here is to deliver service and impact the community, we want to make sure that we're evaluating that, tracking that, and trying to position ourselves to retain. You all have seen this slide too, but this just demonstrates that not only have we lagged in maybe keeping up with inflationary investments, but we also haven't effectively moved people through our ranges. So we've created unintentional compression. Employees with lower tenure versus compared to employees with more midterm or long-term tenure are, comparatively speaking, making a similar annual wage. That's something that also can lead to turnover. As you see here, last year, Burke County had roughly 200 voluntary separations. This is excluding retirement. This is excluding people who were involuntarily separated. These are folks who say, I choose to go work somewhere else. And what we hear during exit interviews is, I don't want to leave, but I can't say no to some of these other opportunities, whether it's private market or some of our competing benchmark local governments in our region. When you look at local government as an industry, even during this Great Recession, the coming out of COVID and the this massive spike we saw in people leaving their jobs. Typically, local government turnover is somewhere in that 15 to 20% range. So we were substantially higher than the industry average. And the most concerning thing is that tends to be ticking up. So if you go all the way back to 2019, the trend demonstrated here in this orange line is that our annual separations were not slowing. In fact, they were the volume was increasing over time. When I took a snapshot of our organizational headcount a few weeks ago, we had 199 of our roughly 650 employees that have been here less than 2 years. Experience matters, institutional knowledge matters. What happens in these cases are not only do you have folks that are onboarding and maybe not having the opportunity to train alongside someone who's more experienced and learn their job, but you also end up with promotional opportunities where people are being promoted ahead of what they're comfortable doing. And all of that over time, when cumulatively happen, again, impacts our ability to pursue high performance, to deliver premier service delivery, and it's something that we have to be aware of. That second system that we've really hyper-focused on is our capital infrastructure needs. Again, when we talk about preparation and vision of the board, in 2020, the board contracted with a company called Mosley Architects to come in. They evaluated all of our buildings across county government, across 6 systems, and were able to quantify a grading score. And what the findings were that a substantial amount of our building stock was reaching or already had reached end of life. And so that again indicated the requirement to start planning forward about how you replace some of that failing infrastructure. I'm going to transition now and talk quickly about our development process and direction from our Board of Commissioners on policy. We had 4 fundamental objectives. Obviously, we want a statutorily and structurally balanced budget that's framed around priorities. We wanted to maintain or improve service levels. So when we talk about doing better and improving and high performance in every single department of our 28 in this county, there is, wherever we are, there's better and there's best. And we want to move there, whether that's budget management, whether that's performance utilization. We want to be pursuing that. We wanted to evaluate operational efficiencies. How can we reduce our cost per unit? How can we provide local government in a more cost-effective way? And then lastly, we wanted to enhance transparency and communication. What are we working on and why? What are we trying to accomplish? How do we know if we're being successful? And I think that this strategic planning and budget process, as I started by saying, is a unique opportunity to do that because it is the one time a year in which the Board of Commissioners, as policymaking and corporate governance, shares a responsibility with staff as we begin to implement and execute on the vision and path that's set forth. And that strategic planning, again, is a shared responsibility that I think is just critical to the model that promotes success and that allows us all to make an impact. That all started back in February as I really onboarded, and that led into some mid-year financial analysis. How did we perform in the first and second quarter of the fiscal year, July through December? What type of flexibility, what mechanically about our budget's working well, what's not working well, where are our priorities, where are we investing? And that led us into a 2-day working session at Lake James State Park, a full 2-day event. We talked about capital, we talked about operations, we talked about our operational systems. Following that, we've been able to meet with all of our operating departments, all 28 of them, some of them multiple times. We've been able to connect with community partners. We've identified legislative priorities and made trips to Raleigh. We've looked at economic forecasts to better balance, our strategy in developing the budget. We've communicated our revenue memorandum, and all throughout that entire process, there's been very detailed and frequent check-ins with our Board of Commissioners to make sure that the way we were moving was in line with the priorities. We're presenting the budget tonight, and there'll be consideration for adoption in June. I've mentioned several times the Commissioner's strategic plan, and I would point out that this is, although there's been a very clear vision and a very intentional effort to be prepared, this is when we talk about increasing accountability and transparency, this is the first time that we've consolidated all those priorities and narrowed those down to writing and put them into a articulated and written strategic plan, which is highlighted by these 5 areas of focus. So these areas, each of these areas have measurable, data-driven deliverables underneath that we're able to evaluate on an every 6 to 12 month basis and again, ensure that we're having measurable production. Of all of the deliverables that are inside of that strategic plan, 5 stood out as top priorities because they had a higher level of support from all 5 board members. 2 of those have to do with people. One is specifically focused on broadband. We also have revenue diversification through a Article 46 sales tax, and then also trying to address some lagging capital needs. Those were the things that our board said were the most important, and that's where we tried to frame resource allocation around in our budget. As I mentioned earlier, a big part of our budget is how is the economy performing? Our economy not only drives cost, as I mentioned earlier, where the cost of fuel, the cost of labor, the cost of tools, supplies, when those prices increase, we experience that. But a tremendous amount of our revenue portfolio is also driven on economic performance, economic energy, consumer spending. And so as we're setting as we're trying to put together predictive analytics, as we're trying to pro forma and forecast what our funding levels are going to be, which will ultimately balance and drive our spend plan, I think that's critically important. When we take a macroeconomic look at some key economic indicators, we all know when we've felt the impact of cost escalation through inflation, we know construction costs are continuing to escalate, and we also know that labor force participation is at a really all-time low at 57%. But there are some reasons to be optimistic. For the first time in more than a decade, Burke County has seen population growth at a modest 0.5%. I'd point out that our school system has also seen an increase in student population, last year at about 11,500 and this year at about 12,001 average daily membership. I'd point out that our building and development land use revenues are continuing to show growth. Unemployment by definition is fully employed in Burke County at roughly 3.5%, and our consumer spending statistics continue to show good energy. I mentioned unemployment was roughly 3.5%, lower than the state average, and has been, other than a brief spike there in January 2020, continued to perform, just at an incredible level. When I look at our labor force by sector, I see that roughly half of our labor force is conducted from public health, public education, and manufacturing. And so I wanted to drill down just a little bit more on manufacturing because it has such a big impact on our economy. Of the roughly $2.7 billion GDP in Burke County, and you can see how that's tracked compared to federal growth over time. That gap has begun to elongate. But manufacturing is a huge creator of jobs, 24% of our total labor force. Manufacturing also tends to be a huge part of your tax base because the machinery and equipment, the personal property that's used to convert raw materials into a finished product is often of high value. So manufacturing is something that I think that is critical when assessing and performing tax base, when looking at consumer spending because of the job creation component. And we can see that of roughly our $2.7 billion GDP, roughly $869 million of it, a large portion comes from that manufacturing sector. So the next thing that we did is, if manufacturing is a little bit of a concentration risk and a critical component of our economy, how do we know how that's performing? And this is just a brief analytic that demonstrates it's a measure of purchasing, logistics, and supply chain's ability to obtain raw materials. And obviously, in the manufacturing world, obtaining raw materials is critical to developing your product and selling it, which helps people keep their jobs. Typically here, anything above 50 would indicate that sector is in a growth period. Anything below 50 is in a contraction period. I've gone back from about 25 years. That red line demonstrates where we are now. And the positive news is we appear to be stable. And I think that gives us some optimism as we're, again, setting that component of the tax base. Another area that we have seen some volatility in that I think it's important to really measure is motor vehicle values. As the board's aware, county staff and the county tax department do not set values for motor vehicles. Those are set through the state tag and tag system, NCVTS, but they are a huge portion of our tax base, roughly $912 million of our $10.6 billion tax base. So a little less than 10%, and missing that by a percentage point or two can have significant impact on revenue streams. So one thing that we know is because of the shortage of microchips over the last couple of years, we've seen incredible cost escalation in used vehicles because of supply and demand equilibrium, meaning if you can't find a new car and you need a car today, you probably are going to buy a used one. And when more buyers are competing, that drives up price. And when price is driven up, it drives up value. And when value is driven up, that's corresponding revenue for local governments. And so what we've seen is with interest rates increasing and supply chains kind of leveling out, that there's been a little bit more of a coming together, if you will, between new and used. But we've continued to see values hold in a steady way. And again, these just kind of give us some insight into how and where we should base our pro forma for motor vehicle values next year. Transition to homes. So we've talked about our labor force, our concentration sectors. We've also looked at motor vehicles. Lastly, I want to look at homes, and I think that this is an even more critical evaluation and analytic this year because we're obviously moving through a revaluation period. We'll talk more about that briefly. But the responsibility to evaluate, I think, the real estate market and make an assumption about a potential correction or a potential recession and the impact that may have on home values, I think is a critical responsibility as we set the tax rate, ultimately, which will be based on our assessed tax value. And so here we've gone back to October to look at existing home sales. And what I would point out is even though there's a little bit of volatility in the market, typically when there's an ebb, there's a flow. And we've seen some balance over the last 6 months in this region. Here's a longer look back all the way to 1993, and this is a measure of new home sales with a pro forma from the U.S. Census Bureau, specifically Moody's Investor Service. And what I would point out is, are we at a lower level than in 2020 and 2021? Of course we are. But if you follow this back and compare to even where 07-08 was when there was the onset of the Great Recession, or where the bottom was, I think it's clear that we're in a stable environment. And although there may be a correction in value because we've seen such an escalation over the last couple of years, it's unlikely that there'll be a complete dip or collapse. Another way to look at it, this is new single-family starts, so this is people starting new construction, and the concept's really the same. When you look at where the market was before this massive collapse in 07, 08, and you fast forward, we are a long way from that, and if you evaluate where we're projected to be next year and you follow it back, it's nowhere near this kind of dip. So I think it's safe to say there could be a slight correction in home values and real estate values over time, but I don't know that it's reasonable to expect there to be some type of catastrophic, based on 30-year data, dip in values. So I say all that to say, when we evaluate comprehensively all of these economic decisions, we did want to be a reasonable, responsible, and have a recession-ready budget, not overly leveraged on economic generated revenue. But we also wanted to make sure that we were trying to do better. We were trying to advance, that we were trying to provide a higher level of service at a more reasoned way, and that, for us, promoted optimism. So in the midst of uncertainty, we rely on data like that. When you're uncertain as to which way to go, we've really tried to find data-driven solutions and analytics that help tell our story, and we understand the diversification of all of our revenue sources are going to be critical. When I look at the proposed FY24 budget, it's balanced on $99.8 million in general fund revenue. About 58% of that comes from property tax. You can see here, as I mentioned earlier, we are navigating through a state-mandated revaluation process of all real property. Of our tax portfolio of roughly a $10.6 billion tax base, you can see that real property growth of roughly 47%, $2.7 billion in growth, is by far the largest component. And as a reminder, the last time that Burke County did a real property reappraisal was in 2019, so pre-COVID, and we've saw all of those market changes since that point. Here's how our revenue portfolio compares over a 3-year period. And again, I mentioned roughly a 58% focus on property tax, about almost 11% on sales tax, and roughly 21% on restricted intergovernmental, which is primarily public health and social services. Here I've put together some quick financial ratios to compare how we're tracking this year compared to some of our peers. Again, when we talk about recession ready, we want to be not overly leveraged on those revenue sources that may be volatile during periods of economic uncertainty. And you can see here, both with property tax and sales tax, we compare very favorably. I'll talk momentarily about reval. It is a huge component of our budget. Many of the things that we're trying to plan for and look out over the next 36 to 60 months versus in a 12-month vacuum. I think that's one of the critical challenges of any budget process, but that's amplified with the responsibility of setting a tax rate during a revaluation. And you've seen 47.1% property tax, or property value growth. And so I think it's important to understand first what reval is. It's a mandated state process that has to happen in North Carolina every 8 years. However, the regulatory agency, which is the North Carolina Department of Revenue, recommends that counties adopt and advance that to do it more often. The more often you do it, the more in line and close to market you would be. The last one in Burke County was in 2019, so we were scheduled to do a 4-year reappraisal, as is most of the counties in the state, in 2023. However, there is an additional component to that guiding statute that says if your tax values are more than 15% out of line with market, then you have to do a revaluation process in that year. So what that means is for every piece of real property in Burke County, we have a value on our tax books. Those for real property, which is buildings, land, and structure, it's only reappraised during a revaluation process, which means home values haven't changed at all since 2019. And while those stay static, market is always changing. And if market drops or escalates by more than 15% above or below that tax value, the Department of Revenue is going to require that you stop at that point and do a reassessment. And you can see the last time, 2019, reval, we were within 0.8% of market, 100% would be market. And since that point, tax values have stayed the same, but sales prices have gone up to the point where our ratio is completely out of balance. That's not unique to Burke County. When you look at our regional peers, McDowell, Catawba, Cleveland, and Lincoln over the last 8 years, that's been a consistent narrative. The cost of housing has increased, driven by primarily labor and materials, replacement cost, and that's what's created this lack of equilibrium. What you can see here, and this goes all the way back to 2003, and it's really a consolidation of all the counties in the state. I've highlighted counties that are in our region. I know that's difficult to see, but the point is that this is a trend that's happened for everybody around us as we've seen competing challenges for real estate. Alexander County was actually the lowest in the entire state last year. Here I've taken all of the sales ratios for all 100 counties, and I've got an average. And if you track it from 2013 forward, you can see coming out of the recession, there were times when tax values exceeded market, and theoretically, consumers could have been paying more in tax than the market was driven. But that's changed as there's been, again, more of a supply-demand change out over time. And last year, statewide, the average across the entire state was almost 20% out of market. So these appraisals, this market value is driven by what we call mass appraisals, which means that we have roughly 900, quote, neighborhoods, which neighborhoods we would define as similarly situated geographic locations and homes and those type of things across the county. We have approximately 900 of those. We group similar properties together and do mass appraisals based on statistical, analytical formulas. It's a very mathematical driven value calculation. This isn't, it's very different than a fee appraisal where you would pay somebody to come walk through your house, evaluate your finishes, measure, and give you a specific price for your home. This is a much more broad brush approach as outlined by the North Carolina Department of Revenue. And what that means is we know that 34% of our homes in Burke County receive a grade C, which means that we apply roughly $115 a square foot value to calculate the value, meaning that if your home is X square feet and it grades as this grade C, you multiply that by 115, and then there's adjustments up or down from there to arrive at the value. So it is a very statistical approach, very objective. I would point out that the 2023 sales ratios were just published, and even though we did a reval January the 1st, we still did not get to 100%. Our values were only at 96% of market, so we're still slightly under. That's how fast the market's changing. Here's just an optic of how values changed across the county. You can see this area, and we've talked about it several times. This High Peaks area was the highest percentage change. It was a substantial change. After we've done some more data exploration, our findings demonstrate that it's not that value here is that much more than here now. It's just that this was undeveloped in 2019, the last time there was a reappraisal, and since that point there's been some investment there that has brought it up, so proportionally it changed a little bit more. But you can see it's a wide mix across the county with pretty, I think, balanced proportional change. I put this here just to remind again of the 10.6 billion in tax-based change. We also had a little bit of growth in personal, motor vehicle, and state boards. As required by the North Carolina Physical Control Act, we have to communicate what's called revenue neutral. There's a very specific calculation. Revenue neutral is a term that's intended to say, had revaluation not happened this year, what would the tax rate be to generate to count for a normal year of growth? But again, essentially active if you hadn't done these mass reappraisals. So in Burke County for this year, when we worked through the formula, revenue neutral per statutory calculation would be 52 cents. That's a reminder we're at 69.5 cents in the current year we're in, so that would be roughly a 17.5 cent reduction. One question that I think is relevant here is how does that impact the average homeowner? How does that impact the economic change of any individual or citizen in Burke County? So here I've taken 3 different home values in a 2022 timeframe, kind of a lower value, a mid value, and an upper value home, and what they would pay annually in tax at our current 69.5 cent tax rate. I've then increased these values by our average increase of 47%. So for example, the $89,000 piece of property now would be valued at $130,000, And I've demonstrated the economic change at a three separate tax rate, a 52 cent, which would be LGC revenue neutral, +2, and a +4. And down here, I've shown what that monthly change would be. So for the average property owner that falls into this $150,000 pre-reval, $220,000 post-reval valuation, at 52 cents, they're looking at about $8 additional per month. At 56 cents, they're looking at about an additional $16 per month in tax levy. I've went a step further. We know, because we're the single collector for the county, that roughly 4 out of 5 taxpayers have an escrow, have a mortgage, and they pay their property taxes through an escrow agent. So we've ran an analytic to say, again, for a low, a medium, and a higher value home, what is the monthly change in mortgage, including the escrow component, recognizing that the principal and interest component isn't going to change. So when you factor in the property tax component to the escrow agent payment, what does that impact? And so mechanically, you can see here for a $125,000 home at a 5% 30-year fix, that person's paying about $628 a month in principal and interest. At 69.5 cents with a $125,000 value, they're paying roughly $72.40 per year in property tax. So that gives that person an average monthly payment of roughly $700. You take that same $125,000 pre-reval value, add 47% to it, now it's worth $183. If you change the tax rate to 56, that person's property taxes change to $85.81 a year. Their monthly payment changes from $700.40 to $713, and that's roughly a 1.9% monthly change in their estimated payment. We've done the same here for 54 cents, and you can see between 1.3 and 1.5% monthly change. And at 52 cents, it's roughly a 1% change in what they're having to pay each month for their housing. Transition away from the property tax component of our budget and revenue portfolio to our sales tax, primarily made up of Article 39, 40, and 42, represents roughly $10.7 million of funding. That is a 3% increase from last year's budget. I would point out that we're performing at a 7% actual experience this year above budget. So again, when we talk about being recession ready, we still think that this is a responsible number at $10.7 million. These optics here just show our experiences going all the way back to 2011, 2012 for Article 39, 40, and 42, and it's been continued growth, and I think that's positive. 39 is a good demonstration of local activity. It's a point of sale driven sales tax analytic, and 40 and 42 are more of a per capita redistribution at a state level, but both locally and at a state level, we've seen expansion of our sales tax revenue. I'm going to transition now to look at our general fund, specifically our operational budgets. I want to really brag on our department heads. Several of those are here with us tonight, and I'm sure there's some that are watching as we stream. And I just want to point out that we started this budget process a little bit late. Typically, our budget process would start in December and early January, and we didn't start until really the onset of February as I arrived. And we did not use an incremental-based budgeting style. We started with a zero-based budget. So literally, I think it's an additional way to amplify the responsibility of setting a tax rate. But for every number in our budget, there's going to be thousands of numbers, 4,000 or 5,000 general ledger accounts. We can point to a specific number, and that's built from zero. We did not start with last year's number and then incrementally add or adjust for cost of doing business. But we challenged every department head and every supervisor in this organization to start with zero and to build that up. And then as we met with those, we wanted to make sure that was justified, that it was reasonable, and then it was advancing what we saw as the strategic initiatives of that department. We also encouraged our folks to pursue this kind of cross-departmental silo removing, cost-saving culture. And that, to me, allows us to transition from a push system to a pull system. Let's do only what matters. If we're doing things that don't advance our priorities, let's stop. If we're not doing things that should be advancing our priorities, we should start doing those today. And I think that's a component of understanding where we're trying to get, which is accomplished through the Board of Commissioners strategic plan. And then lastly, we wanted to leverage what we call reset and reengineering. Reengineering is doing things differently, challenging historic norms. How do we again, whether it's things like timekeeping or contracts or the way that we deploy any service. How do we think about doing it differently and maximizing this concept of you don't always have to start with last year and fix it. Sometimes you can just start from scratch, and that'll create a lot of improvement in our operations. I mentioned, as I point out some of the highlights, that this budget was developed from zero-based. This budget also includes, for the first year ever, dedicated funding for an out-year operational capital reserve. We've also started a risk management fund and portfolio for all things risk management, property and liability, workers' comp, all those components, employee wellness, and we've started a debt service fund. We initiated a 3-phase approach to employee pay. It includes a 5% cost of living adjustment. It includes introduction to performance pay, and it also includes a out-year pay and classification reserve. As the board is aware, we've posted a request for proposal to do a comprehensive pay and classification study that does everything from look at job descriptions that haven't been updated in 30 years to make sure that those jobs are properly grouped and paid at a market competitive wage. As I mentioned earlier, last year we had 200 separations at 33% turnover, and that impacts our service delivery. I'm very pleased that we've been able to cut that in half in the first part of 2023. And I think this pay and classification study that's been endorsed by the Board of Commissioners is the most crucial step to ensuring that we maintain the momentum that we built. We're also transitioning from a 2% employer matched 401k to a 5% employer contributed. Again, when we have lagging pay, we're able to look at payroll deduction codes and see what percentage of our employees are able to contribute to a 401k. And if we really want to be an employer of choice, we should help pave the path for folks taking control of their retirement. And what we saw was less than 20%, less than 1 out of 5 employees in this organization have been able to afford to invest into their own retirement. And we believe that taking that first step forward and advancing that on their behalf is a very good thing. We're also proposing uniformity in our property tax early discount pay. So what that means is right now we have a 2% for July and a 1% for August early pay discount. We're proposing that be uniform across both months. The primary impact will be to large banks and escrow agents. We're also trying to enhance our employee fringe benefits by adding services not removing anything, but adding additional packages for consideration. We've also partnered to provide what are called benefit counselors so that every employee in this organization has an opportunity to spend time on the phone and understand what we do offer and how that may impact them. We're phasing out merit pay, which we see as a de-incentivization for promotion development. It's also a non-standardized way of performance evaluation, so we think there needs to be some changes there. And then longevity pay, the application methodology. Currently, longevity is earned by employees who have had more than at least 10 years of consecutive tenure with Burke County, and it's divided. It starts at a 2% pay increase, and that's divided over 26 pay periods. The recommendation and what's funded in this budget is taking those resources and doing it in a one-time lump sum cash bonus. We think that really infuses a morale boost for our hardworking employees. We've also put $40,000 in the budget for a roadside litter cleanup program. There's a company that typically contracts with the Department of Transportation to do roadside cleanup. They can do up to 8 miles per day, and that's the cleanup component. We know the real way to prevent roadside litter or to stop roadside litter is to prevent it. So on a parallel track to picking it up, we also want to start an education campaign, partnering with our school system, doing marketing, digital advertising, to try to really make the point that Burke County wants to beautify our county. We have dedicated funding as the CAB grant process begins to roll out July 15th. We've made sure we've allocated funding so that we can participate in broadband expansion as well as continue to help build out the great grants and looking for opportunities there. Part of the Board of Commissioners strategic plan included a goal of 90% of households being served. I'll talk about this more shortly, but this budget includes a 13.5% increase for public education. I would point out that the board's been fully involved, and again, we'll talk about it more shortly in the presentation, but the intentionality to building trust and to really having a strong relationship with not only Burke County Public Schools, but also the community college has led to strong communication and identification of priorities, and this budget also includes a 10.3% increase for Western Piedmont. We've continued to support all of the outside funding partners. Search and Rescue here earlier this evening is one of the biggest proponents, biggest partners. And all of this can be accomplished while maintaining the fiscal policies of this board. A quick optic of how our functional expense allocation is done. Roughly 26% of our budget will be in human services, about 30% in public safety, and about 23% in education. And that would compare similarly to previous years. A little bit of change, but not tremendously, as well as the largest three functions for most counties in North Carolina. And here's just a more quantitative way to see that. And then I quickly just want to walk through some highlights of the budget as it relates and ties back into each of the 5 focus areas on the board's strategic plan. Under fiscal stewardship, back in April, you were presented with a 5-year capital improvement plan. It's roughly $63.5 million of out-year capital. That is included and funded in this budget, as well as the debt management policies that you improved as part of that plan. Revaluation management, looking for opportunities to expand and leverage opioid grants and all the broadband grants. Dogwood Trust Foundation is another huge component that we're working with. Reengineering, we talked about that. Revenue diversification with Article 46 and our ARPA spend plan. All of those are critical components that we believe directly relate back to fiscal stewardship. I talked about reengineering earlier. How do we do our business differently? I'll cover quickly personnel requests, employee comp, this introduction to performance management, employee wellness, and some of those grants. When I talk about reengineering, it's focused primarily around how do we operate quicker, how do we operate more efficient, how do we operate at a lower cost, how do we maximize revenue. Those are the kind of the cost avoidance, those type things. And here are just 5 ideas that we have identified during the budget process that we believe will lower our operating costs or maximize revenue. For example, in-house automotive repair. Last year, this organization spent roughly $600,000 in maintenance and repair vehicles. Part of that's an aging and depleted fleet. Part of that is because we haven't done it in a systematic way. So whether that's preferred vendors and contracts or the county doing it themselves, I think that there's clear data that we could reduce our cost substantially, maybe as much as 35–40%, which would, when looked at in a $600,000 context, that's substantial dollars. Technology savings, how do we move quicker? How do we interface with our customers? Things like full implementation of electronic timekeeping. We have a lot of people in this organization that are hand completing, inputting, reconciling electronic or paper timesheets. That is a exceptionally inefficient process they cost money. And we think that's one example of many that we can enhance and try to really stretch our resource allocation. We've talked about solid waste and water sewer and the fact that our general fund is having to support those proprietary funds. And if we were able to change that narrative, the flexibility that would give to our general fund. We want to evaluate EMS billing. We want to look at a return on investment. We currently have a contract. Maybe that's the best way to do it. Maybe it's something that we could evaluate and do in-house. We also want to really build out a more formalized transport agreement with our hospital partners. You'll see as we move forward in the budget presentation, there'll be the recommendation for a transport unit. That's something that's really happening all across the state as interfacility transports and escalation in care become more of a talking point to try to prevent, number one, taking a 911 truck out of rotation, which impacts call delivery time. But it also, we want to make sure that we're able to move patients from facility to facility to get them under the appropriate care. And then public safety apparatus build out, that's another high level example. Right now as we acquire public safety apparatus, we're sending that off to be fully developed at a premium cost. And is there a way to do that in a more effective way? And then lastly, as we talked about systems, our investment into technology, we've continued to try to grow our investment into operational and capital technology and marry that proportionally with the number of users. But I think data security, automation, and customer interface are areas that we have to continue to invest in and refine. I mentioned as we transition to public safety and well-being, focus area number 2, we've talked about this centrally administered EMS system. We also want to talk about the initial kickoff of a community paramedicine program. It's a newer concept here, and that too will help take care of community education. It'll help alleviate treat no transport. It'll help ensure 911 trucks are still in circulation and at their base ready for deployment when dispatched, reducing call volume. And we believe that that is not only an economic decision, but also a response and public safety decision. We're transitioning from a 1 to 2 per year ambulance replacement to a fleet replacement system. That'll be a 5-year rolling lease, as well as trying to make sure that we're adequately replacing the appropriate volume of sheriff vehicles so that we can keep those below that kind of agreed upon mileage for public safety. We've maintained support for our fire departments. We've also funded a long-term contract with Axon to provide body-worn cameras for each of our road officers and detention officers, as well as a full taser replacement system. Currently, our tasers are approaching end of life. I'd point out that all of that is maintained by the vendor. There's nothing that the county is responsible for, hardware, software, or storage. And the Tech 84 body scanner is something used as we take in detention inmates to make sure for their safety and our officers' safety. A high-level snapshot of public safety, roughly a 12.7% increase, moving from 24.8 to about a $27.9 million investment across each of those 5 functions. Our volunteer fire service, we have 21 departments that equate to about a $6.6 million investment. The average tax rate, and this is a supplemental tax rate only specific to households in those districts, last year it was about 10.8 cents. The recommended average rate this year is 13.7. We uniformly saw the same request across all 21. There's a decline in volunteerism, and in order to provide daytime staffing and adequate staffing, each department is having to transition at least portionally to paid staff. And we've also seen a real lag in, and this has a lot to do with the Department of Insurance and tanker ratings, but a real challenge in acquiring new apparatus. And when you acquire new apparatus, it no longer fits in your old building. So they're kind of hand in glove. Average new revenue per unit is about $79,000. Of the 21, 2 units required a rate decrease. Salem and Oak Hill both requested that their rate be reduced. Triple Community Fire requested that their rate be increased. But on average, you can see moving from 10.8 to about 13.7. I put a quick optic at the bottom to demonstrate for an average or approximate average $175,000 home in Burke County. This is going to equate to about a $4.38 per month economic change. Each of those fire departments also have provided additional details, held public hearings, and those rates were endorsed by their unique boards. Transitioning to Health and Human Services, again, about 26% of our total budget. Here I've demonstrated our investment into social services is about $20.1 million. Roughly 36% of that comes from local dollars. The remaining would be from federal and state. And, you know, a vast majority of both of these budgets are people. Again, I mentioned that earlier. And so as we are trying to carve turnover and trying to invest into people and give them the tools they need to do their best work, that drives a lot of this budget. On the public health side, next year's investment is roughly $4.5 million. About 53% of that comes from local dollars. And you can see there, Medicaid eligibility for both departments is roughly the same. When I talk about drivers and people, one of the reasons that it's critical that we are adequately staffed in those 2 functions is because we know that we stick out as it relates into certain driving areas, certain funding driving areas. Here I've looked at some regional peers and adjusted for population the number of opioid poisoning in 2022, and you can see Burke County here unproportionately. It sticks out, and when you have parents that are battling substance abuse, you often end up with a high level of children living in poverty, roughly 30%, and then that is an alternative driver to they could put additional kids in care, and all of that has to have folks managing it. It creates, a wrinkle-out effect that drives a lot of the costs associated with Health and Human Services. I do think between now and next budget, there's some continued refinement that we can work with both departments to better understand some of that data, but generally a big part of our budget. Transitioning to community advancement, I mentioned earlier this roadside litter and cleanup, as well as this goal of advancing broadband. We also have funding dedicated for existing trail and new trail exploration. We funded a water sewer AIA and mapping asset management plan. We know that we need to get our head around more concretely the current status of all of our infrastructure and water sewer, where it's at, what condition it's in. We have asked legislative funding help for that initiative, but in the absence of that being fully funded, we are prepared to advance that project, as well as funding a countywide housing evaluation that helps us develop some public policy solutions to help drive population growth and economic development. Transitioning to economic development, the support for BDI, making sure that we are funded the remaining incentive agreements, making sure that we're helping to be a partner with their initiatives, product development for Burke Business Park, a feasibility study for a Class A industrial spec building. We've talked about that a lot at the board level. That helps really promote job creation and tax base. We talked about manufacturing earlier, and we have all the assets that are ready to go. It seems like a heck of a good opportunity. This feasibility study would help us identify target market, types of building, size of building, location, utility needs, that we can put grant applications together to people like the Industrial Development Fund and Golden Leaf and those type folks to help really spur some energy in our economic development area. We've also funded an economic impact analysis for both of our airports, as well as partnership with a strategic plan implementation with travel tourism. Lastly, your fifth focus area is this employer of choice concept, and that's all about positioning Burke County government to be somewhere where people choose to come to work, and they, we want to onboard the right type of people that align with our values and that want to serve the community, and then we want to keep them and grow them. And that's going to start, as I said earlier, with this comprehensive pay and classification study. I think that's the most foundational way to show value. But there's other ways to demonstrate high value at a low cost, and that's been one of our areas of focus at an administrative level. Part of that is pursuit of substantial equivalency. That primarily is going to impact our public health and social services employees. It essentially transitions control from Raleigh to local leadership. We want to rewrite our entire personnel policy, starting at point A and going through point B, which has really never been done in a way to modernize and make us more nimble. We want to fully evaluate the competitiveness of our fringe benefits. We want to transition to a results-based wellness initiative, meaning when you make good health choices and behaviors, we want to reward you for that. And then we're looking at things that differentiate us. What makes us different than another employer? How can we have high-value, low-cost benefit packages, and things like child care, I think, are an ongoing conversation. Our total investment into people next year, roughly $32.9 million. The budget comes with a recommendation of 11 new FTEs, one in public health that will be at the discretion of the director. We have 5 in EMS. 4 of those are dedicated to interfacility transport, as we talked about earlier. And I would point out that those will be contractual, and they will generate more revenue than their cost. And then 1 will be a community paramedic. This budget includes 2 allocations for budget strategy and performance. Now that we have a more refined budget process and a commissioner strategic plan and a capital improvement plan, we want to make sure that our budget is linked to strategy and that we're measuring the performance of that strategy and reporting back in a really thoughtful way. Animal services includes an animal services officer, code enforcement officer, as well as an administrative function. We have 3 officers to do a 24/7, 365 job in a 500 square mile county. And it is a highly burdensome role and responsibility. And we literally don't have anyone that's answering the phones on a daily basis, and that's what the second position would be. And then lastly, 1 allocation of FTE in human resources. This would be a policy manager for all the things that we've talked about here. We have 4 FTEs currently in central administration, HR, to help manage roughly 800 employees countywide. In order to advance the ball down the court, in order to be more strategic and more effective, we think we need a project manager in that function. I'd also like to introduce this three-phase approach to investment into our people. I mentioned the COLA earlier, as well as 401k advancement. I'd also like to talk, and we've talked about this Penn Class reserve. I'll spend a little bit of time talking about this introduction to performance pay. The total cost for the COLA, and by the way, there was a survey done recently, came out this week. It was a partnership between the North Carolina Association of County Commissioners and the League of Municipalities. Roughly 300 respondents in the survey. The average annual COLA across the state was 4.7%. So we're not gaining, but we are buying down what the investment of the pay and classification study will be. This concept of performance pay, I put total cost zero. The concept is a one-time cash bonus administered organizationally, and it's a return of cost avoidance and cost savings. So if we are able to identify ways as an organization that we can save money and reinvest a portion of that into our employees, I think that is a wise business decision and something that promotes performance and indicates to our employees that performance matters. Here's the concept. I think most people logically agree that individualized pay for performance matters. In some way, your performance should be linked to your pay. Currently, we have no mechanism to achieve that. I'm proposing that we start at an organizational level with 6 identified performance qualifiers, and if we are able to obtain those, a portion of those savings, a portion of those cost avoidance would be reinvested into our employees. I think once we practice that system for some time, we can move to more departmental specific goals and then ultimately to this individual employee driver. Here's mechanically how that would work. We would begin measuring these 6 qualifiers July 1st and measure through March. And each of those qualifiers earned 0.25%. So for example, last year Burke County had a 33% turnover with 200 separations. The concept here is if we're able to maintain between July and March turnover less than 12%, then we qualify for that metric. Health plan costs. We are self-insured, self-funded, $8 million health plan. Our underwriters, and when looking at the market, told us to budget that up 10%. Here we're saying if we have employees who make good decisions on ER utilization, good decisions on medication, good decisions on exercise, behavioral decisions that impact positive wellness outcomes, that ultimately will save us money. The same dollars pay those health claims that pay our light bill, that pay our contracts. And so if we're able to minimize the growth in that fund through intentional performance, again, that creates cost avoidance that we can then reinvest. And you can see all the way through, each of those creates substantially more than what that reinvestment cost would be, but I believe it is a motivator and a sign to our folks. If we accomplish all of them, we could qualify for up to a 1.5% cash bonus that we paid out in March. I talked briefly about our employee wellness fund, but we are self-insured, self-funded. It covers more than 700 lives. Blue Cross Blue Shield will continue to be our third-party administrator. We pay all our health claims, all our HSA contributions, and the co-pays from our PPO. And the fact that it's self-funded, again, it acts no differently than any other spend component of our budget. So a penny saved here is a penny earned. Talk briefly about our capital plan. This was covered in detail at your April work session, but roughly we're leveraging about $16.2 million in pay-as-you-go capital expansion, married with about $22 million in grant funding, and out of a $63.3 million capital plan advancement, we are assuming only one of those projects may require financing or debt, and that would be our Health and Human Services building. All of these numbers are obviously in the very early stages, but this plan as presented in April is funded in your budget. Talk briefly about public education. Our commissioners have had really 3 fundamental goals, and I talked about this a little bit earlier, but I've been so impressed with the leadership that I've witnessed from these 5 commissioners since I've onboarded in thinking differently. Public education funding was something that I really struggled to get my head around here because it was done really differently than anywhere else in the state of North Carolina. And I just commend the intentionality to relationship building over the last few years before I arrived. When we talk about preparedness, opportunity, and execution, I think that those meetings and those high trust conversations have allowed us to now begin to transition and discuss about what are our goals, what are our objectives, and how do we get there. And our Board of Commissioners really had three fundamental goals for public education this year. We wanted to have competitive operational funding. We wanted to make up in lagging teacher supplements because no different than county government losing employees, we know that high talent retention and recruitment in the classroom is going to impact student outcomes. And teacher supplements is really the way to differentiate ourselves from regional peers. And then we also wanted to improve ratios as far as teacher students in the classroom. Here's how we compared in local supplements. I know that there was a change several years ago. Commissioner Burns and I've talked about that, that was required because of affordability. And that stabilized at that point, but since that, it's really created a lag. And so I just applaud the board for recognizing that and prioritizing not only county employees, but also Burke County Public School employees. We also looked at student-teacher ratios and wanted to help be part of the solution to really lower that ratio, again, believing that that will have a positive impact. The total funding included in the budget for next year is $18.5 million. That's approximately an increase of about $2.2 million. It's $14.1 million in operations, $4.4 million allocation in capital. It gets our per pupil allocation to roughly $1,541, which is an increase of 9% and exceeds the request from the school system. At the community college level, I've here showed just how we compare with the state average. There's 58 community colleges in North Carolina. We are starting to see a turn in FTE. FTEs for community colleges is a little bit different than other organizations. That's a representative of full-time students. When I look at us compared to these other community colleges in North Carolina, from a per FTE funding perspective, you can see here we're in blue and the orange. We compare very favorably. When I look at total community college funding as a percentage of the general fund, Burke County's here in green. Again, compared to these peers, we really, right kind of in the sweet spot of where we should be. What was a little bit challenging, here in this optic, the bar graph represents operational funding, and the line represents capital allocation. And anyone who's ever worked through a multi-year budget process, reducing volatility is a good thing. We want to have predictability and consistency in out-year planning. And so what you can see in this line is in previous years, that's been up, down, up, down. So what we tried to work with Dr. Welch and his team on is to really identify capital needs over a 5-year period. This goes all the way out through 2028, and arrive at a solution that gives the county and the Board of Commissioners, again, with the responsibility of setting a tax rate, predictability in the future with leveling that out. The operational request is at $2.9 million. That's roughly a 7.4% increase, almost exactly in line with inflation. It adds one additional maintenance, groundskeeping type position, and the capital allocation would be at $450,000. Outside agency support for next year's budget. As I mentioned earlier, this includes a multitude of nonprofit partners, our LME, MCO. Next year's total allocation is $816,000. That's slightly less than last year. Several reasons for that. One is Partners does have some internal fund balance that we're going to leverage to fund some priorities there. We've also had some skip dollars roll off in this year's budget, but fairly comparable to where we were last year. Spend just a moment on our solid waste and water departments, our proprietary funds. The solid waste department does include an 8.3% increase. This is a pass along. We are a purchased water system, which means that we don't treat it. We buy it from other producers and we resell it. We're passing along the rate increase that we've received excuse me, I'm going to go to water sewer. Somehow I'll go here and I'll go back. I was talking about water, but I have my solid waste slide up. I apologize. Everything I said was right. It was the wrong slide. So moving from a $6 to $6.50 per 1,000 gallon revenue rate, you can see there between the difference between revenue and expenditures, as we know, is roughly $250,000. The fund is not self-sustaining at this point. The water sewer fund does include a proposal for a 10-year rate stabilization study, as well as that, and that'll help us map out what our rate structure needs to be long-term. So again, we're not in this kind of mix and match of what do we need to do this year. And it also includes a capital reserve investment for water meter replacement as well as sewer meter replacements. And included in your capital improvement plan is that Indian Hills pump station replacement, as we've all talked about many times. On the solid waste side, it also has an 8.3% increase from $82 to $88. Very similarly, revenues do not yet cover expenditures from the business model perspective. That's why we're proposing this rate stabilization study on this function as well. We also want to spend just a little bit of money on a feasibility study for a municipal solid waste landfill, so that would give us local control for handling our own waste and really reduce the risk that I think we face next year in a contract year with our transport hauler and our transfer station. We've invested half of a roll-off truck into our capital reserve. I mentioned that litter prevention campaign. We are going to have complete construction of East Burke and Jonas Ridge. And then we want to talk about how do we improve our convenience sites. We know that this is one of the most high volume interfaces between county staff and our customers and our citizens. So we want to make sure that those places are well lit, that they're clean. We want to make sure that our employees have adequate facilities, and that efficiency and safety continues to be a top priority. Lastly, I'll leave you with this as a summary. The budget is presented and balanced on 56 cents. That's revenue neutral plus 4 cents. But I've tried to map out 3 optional tax rates that a month from now, after you conclude your public hearing and have evaluated the budget in detail, the Board of Commissioners may consider and choose from. Our 52 cents would be revenue neutral. I'm calling that the no advancement. That's the steady as she goes tax rate. That does not allow us to really adequately compensate our employees. It doesn't allow us to fully fund out-year capital or technology, and it's going to delay much of the implementation of the Board of Commissioners strategic plan. At 54 cents, I would call that incremental advancement. I think that does allow us to consider employees and capital and technology in some way, but not fully implement. And I think starting already a little behind, it would really be a challenge to remain competitive. At 56 cents, I think that we are able to fully invest in our people, fund our out-year capital, balance technology, budget fulfillment, and I think also service delivery expansion with a focus on the Board of Commissioners strategic plan. Also included as part of your budget, in order to implement the budget as presented, it's going to require some modifications to a few areas of our personnel policy. Remember, I mentioned earlier, we think that there's a need. Lorinda Johnson, our HR director, literally has pages of notes she's kept over the years for areas of the personnel policy that she would like to update, to modernize, that are always workarounds. But in order to implement this budget as presented, there are some portions of that policy that we need to go ahead and change as part of the budget implementation, so that we're not in out of balance there. And so I can talk through each of those. Essentially, I mentioned longevity pay, transitioning to lump sum. We talked about pay for performance. We're transitioning away from a merit pay system. What I would say about that, for employees who were due merit pay within the next 12 months, July through June, we have captured those folks, and they'll receive what they would have received. So no one, we're avoiding creating winners and losers. But implementation of this pay for performance system will require some policy modification. Last year, the county moved away from awarding comp time. What we're proposing is that we reinstate that. So currently, all overtime for non-exempt employees is paid as you go. And we think there's financial savings as well as employee benefit and morale boost from allowing non-exempt employees to earn some level of comp time. The North Carolina Department of Labor and regulatory agency would say any non-exempt employee other than public safety who's above 240 hours must be paid out. We're recommending setting a policy much lower than that, something between 80 and 100 hours that employees could cover. So there is no compensatory liability to the county, but it does allow people, especially new hires or someone who may have an illness, to be able to take some time off work and have some work-life balance. And we've heard that from many of our employees, that they would appreciate the time off as much as they would appreciate, as much as they appreciate the few extra dollars in their banking account. The COLA administration for employees over max, because many of our pay ranges are lagging, we're having employees approach the max, and currently there's a practice of a one-time cash bonus for those folks, but it's not in policy, so we're recommending adding that, and then starting pay and shared leave. Right now, shared leave is tied to employees who qualify for FMLA. So if you, in order to qualify for FMLA under federal law, you have to work here for a year. So in the instance where a person works here and hasn't yet completed 12 months of continuous service, they're not allowed to participate in shared leave, which is a real burdensome challenge at times. Mr. Chairman, I'm happy to answer any questions you may have as far as next steps. I would ask that the board receive formally this budget document and consider scheduling a public hearing for June the 20th, 2023.
Thank you, Mr. Epley. I will tell you, my first question is, do you need a water?
I said a lot of words.
That's a lot. My second thing is just a comment before I open it up for comments from the others. We all, as commissioners, have seen them, not hundreds, thousands of hours that you, your staff, your department heads, every employee have participated in, organizational wide. And this is so well thought out and so professionally done. And like you said, zero-based formula, build it from the ground up. No guesswork. Numbers don't lie. And so I just want to make those few comments and tell everyone here that how much I appreciate each and every one of you, because I know the work that went in. And that being said, I'll open it up to comments. I know the commissioners have spent combined hundreds of hours on this as well, and we've been in not only regular meetings but individual meetings with Mr. Epley on a regular basis, and working through this budget. And you presented this to us prior to this, and so we've been privy to this information. So hopefully you've had an opportunity to digest this information. I know you've been doing it incrementally over the several months, because take one big bite, it's a lot for one thing, but you made it very digestible. And so at this point, gentlemen, we've been presented all this information, multi-step through the process. Do you have any questions or comments for Brian at this time?
Mr. Chairman, I just have a couple of quick questions. On the longevity pay, is that going to be based on date of hire, or will that be a chosen time of year?
Well, it'll be, so the measurement is date of hire. When did you start and when is your anniversary day? The payment methodology will be singular, late fall, sometime Thanksgiving, 1st of December timeframe.
Okay. And on the education side, is what we're doing, how is that, is there any effect to the low wealth funding formula?
So what we're doing does not affect low wealth. There was a session law originally implemented in 2017 that transitioned the state formula to a weighted average formula that's potentially impacting the school's budget for this year. I think we're working through that. I think we've found some inconsistencies in the General Assembly's formula, and we've pointed that out to DPI, and we're going to be able to rectify that. But the change in local dollars to public schools should not impact low wealth funding.
Okay, thank you. That's all. Other than to say, wow, this is there's a lot of work here, and I want to express my appreciation to you and the staff. There's a lot that went into this.
Thank you, Commissioner Burns. Anybody else? Questions, comments? All right.
Mr. Chairman, if I could, one more thing, and I know I kind of harp on this at every meeting. Article 46, as we think about moving forward with our tax rate, this is something that, in my opinion and my belief, that we really need to consider adopting on a referendum. I know it's in our priorities. If you look at neighboring counties who have already implemented this, that have a much larger tax base than ours is, that's a tremendous amount of revenue, and it would give us the ability to adjust that personal property tax rate when appropriate. So I just want to make sure that we're really clear that the Article 46 that's being proposed is not just we want to have another tax. We want a taxing revenue stream that is paid by everyone that comes through our county, owns property in our county, or whatever the case may be. So
and that would be the equivalent of 2.5, 3 cents. So, significant.
Thank you, Mr. Burns. Anything else, gentlemen? If not, what's the pleasure of the board?
Mr. Chairman, I'm going to make, pardon me, a two-part motion. Part number one is to acknowledge receipt of the manager's recommended budget for 23-24 fiscal year, and ask for a vote by show of hands.
Signify with uplifted hand, gentlemen. 5-0, Madam Clerk.
Mr. Chairman, my second part of the motion is to schedule a public hearing for Tuesday, June the 20th, 2023 at 6 p.m. or as soon thereafter as persons may be heard.
Thank you, Commissioner Carswell. Signify with the uplifted hand. Motion carried, 5-0, Madam Clerk. Thank you, Commissioner Carswell. Gentlemen, that brings us to reports and comments. I'll start with Margaret Pierce.
Thank you. I just want to say it's been an exciting budget process. Love all the data. I just eat that up, so I'm very excited and very appreciative of the things recommended by our manager. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. County Manager. County Attorney. Skipped one. You have to hold your fire a little bit. I've got to let your voice rest a little bit, Mr. County Manager. I'm messing with you. So, Mr. County Attorney.
Yes, sir. Since the last meeting of commissioners, I've been involved in several projects, including conducting a closing on the purchased property at 102 Drexel Road, including preparation of deeds, right of first refusal agreements, owner affidavits, Form 1099s for each of the 15 sellers. This is the property that will be used for the new EMS Station 1, and also reviewed the press release announcing the purpose. I attended the working group meeting of the Board of Commissioners and Board of Education on April 20th, prepared an offer to purchase and contract, conducted a title search, prepared closing documents, and conducted a closing on the purchase of 2 acres of property adjoining the convenience center on Highway 126. I've worked with county officials concerning record requests made of the Board of Elections, and I'm currently drafting an option agreement for BDI for certain property in Burke County that they wish to be able to purchase in the future. And that's my report.
Thank you, sir. Madam Clerk.
No comments tonight, thank you.
Mr. County Manager. Now.
I've said a lot.
Okay. Commissioner Smith.
I just want to say, if you're a fan of the Andy Griffith Show, that we've got Burke County's answer to Howard Sprague right here in our county manager.
Commissioner Burns.
No comment tonight, Chairman.
Vice Chair Britton.
No comments.
Mr. Carswell.
I just want to thank everybody for your thoughts and prayers during my recent illness. It's been a hard road to recovery. I'm still not there yet. I thank you again for all the prayers, and thank you for working with me during that time.
We are so glad to see you back healthy and on the mend, my friend. And I will say just a couple things. I know for those I believe you probably know, the county manager and I did a presentation at the History Museum. That was a really nice turnout. And then we did a presentation at the school board budget, and so that was very productive. And we will be, Stephanie Norman has asked us to come speak to her fellow compatriots in the Register of Deeds from across the state. And so we'll be doing that Thursday morning. We'll be at the top end of the building for the hospital on Friday, representing the county as well. So just wanted to make y'all informed of that. Courtesy reminders, May 23rd and 24th. I think everybody signed up to go to the County Advocacy Day. Is that correct, Madam Clerk? Okay, so down in Raleigh. So gentlemen, we'll be down there next week. Reminder, May 29th, Memorial Day, county offices are closed. June 6th, pre-agenda meeting at 3 p.m. June 20th, regular 6 p.m. meeting. Budget, and that'll be the budget public hearing and adoption. July 4th, obviously, county offices closed for Independence Day. July 5th, the pre-agenda meeting will be canceled. We'll be having one meeting on July 5th, and that'll be our regular posted meeting. And I would remind everybody, once again, as we always preach, don't litter. Please pick up trash, cover your loads to the landfill and convenience sites, and please spay or neuter your pets. At this point, I'll turn it over to Madam Clerk for vacancy announcements.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the board, ladies and gentlemen of the audience. We have the following opportunities for citizens to be a part of county government: the Adult Care and Nursing Home Community Advisory Committee, City of Morganton Board of Adjustment and Planning Board for the ETJ areas, Burke Senior Center Advisory Council, East Burke Senior Center Advisory Board, Council on Aging, Burke County Board of Health, Partners Consumer and Family Advisory Committee representing traumatic brain injury, the Hickory Regional Planning Commission, the Western Piedmont Community College Board of Trustees, and the Jury Commission.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. And always, people ask how they can become involved in county government. Well, there's the way. We have plenty of opportunities. We encourage you to please sign up and be very active. Kay will put you to work, I promise. Gentlemen, there's no need for closed session. And at this point, is there any other comments?
Mr. Chairman, just wanted to acknowledge the passing this week of a former commissioner, Jack Carroll.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. Let's all keep Jack, and I mentioned that in our pre-agenda meeting, he and his family, he had years of service here at the county and served several years as chair as well. So I will say again, keep his family and your thoughts and prayers, please. And I wish Randy safe travels tonight. He gets to go represent us in Raleigh, so he's walking out the door as soon as we adjourn. So I will accept a motion to adjourn. Oh, Mr. Britton, beat you to it. All those in favor signify with uplifted hand. That is 5-0, Madam Clerk. Thank you. Thank you for everybody being here.
I did it for you.